What's up? It's Magnus here, and I just got a haircut, thankfully, because every time I do these videos, after a couple weeks, my hair starts to grow. My sister gave me a cut, but I got like this weird thing going on top. But anyway, enough about that. If you're new to my channel, I talk about cameras, specifically for video. So if you like that type of stuff, definitely consider subscribing. But today we're going to talk about how the video helps the photos. So the question is, how can RAW 8K help you take better photos or capture that right moment? This is a trick that I kind of did a video in the past with the Blackmagic, being able to record 4K RAW and then of course bringing it into editing software and then doing tweaks with that RAW to create a wonderful and totally usable 8 megapixel photo. Well, now we have the R5, and the R5 can record up to 30 frames per second in 8K RAW. So how could that help a photographer? Well, if you're ever in a situation, and this is where I recommend using it the most, and definitely not doing your whole photo shoot session just using this, but if you're like, for example, at a wedding or something and you want to get that perfect kiss at the right time, or maybe putting the ring on the finger at the right time, and you want to make sure you capture that perfect frame. If you record 8K RAW, what you're actually doing is recording the sensor data 30 or 24 frames per second, depending on how you set it up. And you're getting all that information. You're getting all the color information. You're getting basically getting all the dynamic range that the sensor is going to capture there, as well as the ability to tweak your white balance and ISO in post. So that's amazing. And the fact that you're capturing at 30 frames per second is nuts. It's just like awesome. Now, the thing that you got to keep in mind though is that because you're recording with the intention of actually using the still frames and the pictures of the video, is that you don't have to worry about the 180-degree rule, which is a rule that says basically double your frame rate for shutter speed. But you don't have to worry about that, especially if you're trying to stop the motion. You should probably crank up that shutter speed a lot higher so you can pull the still frame that you want. Got to remember that you're using it for the purpose of taking photos, so frame it like you're taking photos and just let that record button fly. But also know that because you're doing it in a video mode, it's going to simulate an electronic shutter, not a mechanical shutter. So you might get some jello or some imperfect shots depending on what you're recording or what you're doing. So don't do any fast pans or anything, because then that'll ruin your picture. But at least for some action, it can look pretty presentable. So any fast moving sports though, you still might have a little bit of distortion, which might actually take away from the moment. But if you're just shooting that perfect moment, or for example, here's a quick setup. Have you ever taken a picture of a big group of people and you always want to get that one moment where everyone's looking at the camera without someone looking to the side, someone not smiling or whatever? Well, this works perfectly for that, because you're capturing the moment as is, and you're not going to miss a moment for that split second when everyone was actually looking at the photo. In Premiere, this is the R5 footage in 8K. This is just a frame that I have of it. One thing that I definitely recommend is when you film in 8K, actually film with proxies with 4K, because it'll let you scrub through the footage a lot better. I have a proxy attached to this 8K file, so I can just scrub through the proxy, because actually finding the 8K footage is a little bit extensive. As you can see, it was flashing a little bit as I was moving around. So let's say I wanted to use this frame. One of the things that I would do, and I'm showing you in Premiere, but you can absolutely do this with DaVinci Resolve. In fact, DaVinci Resolve, you can practically edit the whole color correction if you want. In DaVinci Resolve, it works smoothly, but I'm showing you on Premiere for this tutorial. So once you import the footage and you link the proxies, up on the top left, you've got this effect controls where you can actually switch the master controls. And from here, you can adjust the color temperature of the photo, the tint, and the exposure. I bumped up the exposure a little bit because I had a higher shutter speed to stop the motion. And then I set the color temperature to 3200, but I believe it was 6000. And at 6000, you'll see the color once it refreshes, because again, it's really slow in Premiere. You see how it shifts to really yellow. It still looks kind of like, okay, you know, I just must have had my white balance settings completely off when I recorded it. But in post, you can just adjust it here. Once you have your photo and you think you've adjusted some exposure, contrast, and whatnot, and you got the temperature exactly how you want it, before doing your master edits in Lightroom, you want to go to this little camera export frame, and if not, you can just add it using this plus icon, and then you just export the frame into whatever file format you choose. I chose JPEG for this circumstance. Now the photo will be actually a 35 megapixel photo, completely 35 megapixels. And here's another still frame that I took off of the camera, and I cropped down the sides because you're going to get a 35 megapixel photo, but it's going to be 17 by 9, which isn't a traditional photo format. So what I did is I cropped the sides so that it could be a traditional photo format, and then I looked at the resolution. It's around 30 megapixels once I cropped out the sides. What you see here is basically an initial photo that I already adjusted the white balance for. I already adjusted the exposure for with raw controls, which is what we really worry about when we're working with raw. And because it's a JPEG now, I still have the ability to, of course, do further tweaks to the photo and get it exactly how I want it. Or with something like DaVinci Resolve, you can definitely edit all of the photo there and then get the exact colors and the exact look that you want, because DaVinci Resolve, like I said, is a color editing machine. And as you can see, even though it was pretty far, I used a 20mm lens. There's still a lot of detail here, whereas this same frame on the Blackmagic, there's not as much detail on the photo, so it doesn't zoom in as much. But it's just the same shot, same frame, though I cut off my head there because of the positioning and I jumped a little bit too high. But you get a lot more information. 30 megapixel photos, where the Blackmagic in its entirety is an 8 megapixel photo. Full advantage to edit to your heart's content and just never miss that moment. And I just wanted to show you that, yeah, you get a lot of detail there. And my goofy dancing with both pre-haircut was actually kind of fun. So anyway, that's all I have to say. And as far as camera news, Canon seems like they're about to announce 2 8K cinema cameras, which seem exciting. And it seems that Canon's all in on this 8K video stuff. And they're positioning themselves to be a competitor in actually the cinema camera video space from a high-res perspective, something that Blackmagic's already saying, hey, we got 12K. Granted, the results that you get are disputable, but I don't think Blackmagic does a bad job at all. I love their Blackmagic 4K. And Canon, at least from a looks perspective, really has a good camera in their hands with the C series of cinema cameras. So 2 new 8K cameras from Canon, awesome. And then Sony, any day now, we're going to hear about the A9 III, which potentially could have 8K, or maybe not. What will it have? Who knows? We'll stay tuned and we'll talk about it once we find out some more. But as always, like, share, and you can make my day if you subscribe today. This is Magnus, and I'm out. Well, I got a warm orange glow here, don't I? Well, that's because I got a heater heating me up because this room gets nice and frosty. Anyway, thanks you guys for watching, and see you next time. Bye-bye.